Well, hey there, and welcome into another episode of the Storyworld Podcast. Steve Stram here, your boy Al. What's up, Al?
Hey, Steve, doing well. How about yourself?
Man, I'm doing so good. I can't wait to talk about some Nazis.
Yeah, that's yeah, that's what.
I mean, doesn't that sound exciting?
Who doesn't love a good discussion about Nazis? So,
I
yeah,
mean, I feel like we've lost the audience already. There is no audience right now.
that's fine. We'll get entertained by it. But if you read the title to the video, you would know that we are not talking about Nazis in the sense where we are big fans, but we are talking about the movie Inglourious Bastards, which we just watched a few nights ago.
Although a little bit of a fun fact, conspiracy theory before we go on. Okay,
let's hear it.
So I'm German, and my initials are SWAS, which is SWAS. And so if you add 4 more letters, it's like bad, right? So anyway, we don't want to say that. I'm just saying. Yeah, it's weird.
I feel like I shouldn't be friends with you anymore.
Well, I love Jews, and my favorite person on the planet, Jesus Christ, was a Jew. So it's all
good. Well, there you go. I guess I'll take you at your word.
And I didn't name myself. I was too small, and I couldn't speak.
Okay. Yes. All right. All is forgiven. So yes, the big screen. Now so this is the first movie I think that you watched that Quentin Tarantino has made, correct?
Yes, and for those not yet in the know, if you haven't picked up on our clues or watched the title, if you haven't seen the title of this video, the thumbnail or the title, we're talking about Inglourious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino movie. And yes, this is actually what
I already said that part, Steve. I said that's all right.
Of course you did.
Back on track.
Of course you did. Of course you did. You said that already.
I did say that already. That's okay. Now people know for sure that we're not talking.
They know for sure. See, professional podcasters would cut all this out. But that's why you're not listening to a professional podcast.
But if we're anything, it ain't professional. So
that's right. We just have cool mics that make us look like we are.
Yes.
And lights.
It's a facade. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, Quentin Tarantino, I'm a big fan of his. I'm glad you got to watch for the first time. I'm always hesitant for some reason about when we watch a movie that either one of us hasn't seen or I've seen and you haven't seen, because I'm worried that you won't like it, but you always come out liking the same movies I do. So I'm very glad of that. Yeah. And Inglourious Bastards was a no surprise there. So anyway, I guess I should read the synopsis before we get into it, just for people who haven't watched it. So it is the first year of Germany's occupation of France. Allied officer Lieutenant Aldo Rain, played by Brad Pitt, assembles a team of Jewish soldiers to commit violent acts of retribution against the Nazis, including the taking of their scalps. He and his men joined forces with Bridget von Hammersmark, a German actress and undercover agent, to bring down the leaders of the Third Reich. Their fates converge with theater owner Shoshana Dreyfus, who seeks to avenge the Nazis' execution of her family. What's funny is reading that, except for aside from maybe the scalp taking part, seems like a setup for a very kind of gritty, solemn World War II movie. Your typical
very dramatic, right?
And it is anything but. What's funny is I watched the trailer again a week or so ago before we watched it, and the comments basically all said, like, this does not do the movie justice. Like, you're not prepared for what you're about to watch. I'm sure that there are the most accurate description, kind of a shorthand of this movie, was a Jewish revenge story. Essentially, is what this is, in an alternate history of World War II, in the most glorious of violence and retribution taking against the Nazis that could ever be told. I don't know. What are your initial thoughts on kind of seeing the movie for the first time, Steve?
Oh, well, I didn't know what to expect, other than you gave me a little hint that Tarantino was kind of known for just letting it happen, right? To use, Howard Stern, right? Letting it happen, right? He takes his time in the scenes, and he built it up. He's actually a very good marketer, if you will. He's really good at holding attention. And then the payoff at the end is just epic. But every scene is very well crafted, like very clearly. His movies are done in such a way that a lot of other directors are not brave enough to do, is the reality. And they think in order to hold the attention of the audience, they have to cut scenes a bunch of times, and use other filmmaking tricks to keep you engaged. And in many cases, that's true. But Tarantino appears to be such a good writer that the scenes really do carry themselves, and the actors that he chooses for the roles are just incredible at making that happen. And I also found that the movie was paced very well. So you would have a scene, for example, the opening scene, that just takes so long. I mean, you're 22 minutes into the movie and still in the opening scene. And you might think, oh, that's so boring. Oh, it's not, though. It was incredible, the buildup. But then right after that, you get a good few moments of release, right?
Yes.
Where it's a little bit faster paced, a little bit more of the dynamics of the different characters come in. And so the payoff, I found, is not only there actually in what happens in that scene, because it typically is, but then it's also there in that, like, you get almost this endorphin rush after what he, after that particular scene, with whatever scene comes next. It's a really good, you don't get two scenes back to back that are similar.
Yeah.
So he's really good at pacing it out and structuring it. And I thought it was fantastic. I mean, really, really well done on the structure.
I'm sure we'll cover different stuff here too in the future, but I kind of want to take a deep dive as well in my podcast at some point, like really studying his films and everything. Cause you're absolutely right. There's a lot to be taken there from, like what you said, even especially from a marketing perspective, holding people's attention and how to do that. But from storytelling, everything that he does there is extremely applicable to writing a fiction book. Like I'm thinking of, like, you have magic systems for books. I'm almost thinking of just like a writing system where making rules for myself, like a lot of it goes without saying, but just like every scene should be purposeful and every like detail should have like meaning behind it. It should be important. And, in one of my favorite, so the Covenant books, I feel like one person made a comment on it where every chapter, sometimes chapters are just like, the author will give a title to it that kind of relates to it and then moves on, and another chapter. But I want to have a book where someone hears the name of a chapter, they can recall what happened in that chapter because it's so memorable. Just making everything meaningful in each moment of your story that you're telling. And I think Quentin, I'm not going to put on a list of who's the best director and who's not, but he's one of the best, hands down, just because he has that skill and talent as a writer, getting the right actors to play the parts, knowing how to hold the tension, knowing when to release it. The comedy too involved. It's a perfect mix of everything. There's a lot to study there. Like I'm sure there's film classes at colleges that just go over his movies at certain points to teach the students things. But anyway, that's kind of more thoughts on that.
Yeah. What I notice him doing, and I'm actually, because I'm really like nerding out on this idea of world building in business, I'm really nerding out on that right now and having a fun time sort of learning about people who've talked about this, because it's actually the one thing that like people do really well. Certain people do really well, particularly the ultra successful people, but oftentimes they don't talk consciously about it. Sometimes they may not even know that they're doing it. For example, Elon Musk. Okay. What makes Elon Musk work? Okay. Well, it's not, he doesn't pay for marketing. He doesn't have a marketing budget. He literally, like, you can read, he doesn't believe in having marketing and advertising budgets for his stuff. He doesn't want to market it. He literally believes, build it and they will come. But he's subconsciously doing something that he doesn't even realize he's doing. So one of the things, as I'm reading his biography, that has come up, I promise this is related to the movie. Okay. One of the things that has come up is, obviously there's been a lot of tumult in his life, just crazy stuff, right? I mean, he's known for exploits with women, and he's got like a bunch of kids, and he's the richest man on the planet. There's that little detail, and where he's fixing sustainable energy, and he's taking us to Mars, and he's drilling tunnels in the earth, and just like
it's crazy someone like that exists.
It is, isn't it? It's really insane. And fun fact, you might not know this, but Tony Stark was actually modeled after Elon Musk in the original Iron Man movie. His character was, and so you might think, well, okay, this is a crazy dude. Well, he is a crazy dude, but like one of the things that his book highlighted was this tweet that he put out this one time that was like, I think it might have had to do with the context was his takeover of Twitter and turning it into X and everything. And it's like all this crazy stuff going on. And he put out a tweet that was so genius and so brilliant. And the tweet was, "But aren't you entertained?" Now think about that for just a second. But aren't you entertained? And in that moment, when I thought about that, it clicked for me that I know why Elon Musk is so successful. Ultimately, he's world building, right? He's painting a vision for the literal future in reality that's based on fiction worlds from days gone by. Like he's very heavily influenced by Isaac Asimov, by The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Foundation series, just all kinds of science fiction, even Star Trek and stuff like that were actually very influential on him designing the future, which is an interesting thing that I've told you about that I think we actually need to like separate that out as a separate topic and talk about sometime, how fiction literally paves the way for visionaries to imagine what's possible. It almost has to start in the imaginative, the fantastic world, before it can be brought into the real world. And so that's a very interesting concept I think we should talk about. But it's interesting with Elon that he understands that people need to be entertained. He understands that dramatic demonstration is important, like having an AI day where he presents the new Tesla bot, the Optimus bot with a lot of fanfare and things like that. He's got rules, right? There are rules and laws and points of view. For example, I'm going to have lots of kids however I can, because it's important to have kids. And by the way, you should have lots of kids too. That's what he would say. He has an algorithm. It's a definable thing. He talks about it. He has an algorithm for how to solve problems, or for how to improve efficiency and make a company better. It's a literal 5-step algorithm that he has. So there are rules and laws and vernacular and language and nuances to his world. He talks about being a spacefaring civilization, right? That's a tidbit in his world. And so Elon Musk, Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, all the big players that you could think of, this is what they're good at, world building. Okay, why did I go down that rabbit trail? Because this is also what Quentin Tarantino is doing, in my opinion, at a meta level. So it's world building in kind of a meta sense. He's not just your average director. By the way, Chris Nolan, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg, potentially, in some respects. Why are there certain directors who their movies? You say it's literally M. Night Shyamalan might be another example. If you have an M. Night Shyamalan, which I've actually never seen any of his stuff, but this is how big this is and how much this works. If you have an M. Night Shyamalan film, or a Quentin Tarantino film, or a Chris Nolan film, or a James Cameron film, you already know some things and have some expectations about what that film will be in virtue of who they are as a filmmaker. And that it's not just, they're a good filmmaker or they have a particular style. No, there's a world with rules and regulations and laws and certain way that things should be. And in any of Quentin's worlds, you're going to have certain things that are the case. For example, the building up of the tension. And I was watching a couple interviews after we saw this movie with him, just so I could learn more about him and his world. And he's not talking about it that way, but that's exactly what's happening, right? What's happening is that he has applied his point of view, which is very important. Most directors don't have a point of view. They're just taking what the screenwriter has and trying to make a good movie that engages and entertains or whatever. But trying to make a good movie and having a point of view as a writer-director, that's entirely different. And so he's world building in this meta sense and getting people along for the ride. And that's how guys like Quentin Tarantino and James Cameron can be successful with a third of the number of films underneath their belt because what they're building is something that is in itself special and has natural appeal and has a style that is undeniable. And plus, at the bottom line, it's also just really dang good. It's just good.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this week actually in other discussions, but you have to, yes, you have to be good at what you do, but you don't have to be the best. It helps to be the best. I think Quentin Tarantino is one of the best, but if you can separate yourself even just a little way, like if you're operating in some type of generic setting, whether it's producing a like common movie genre or writing in a fiction genre that's quite popular, if you can just set yourself up and differentiate yourself in one way. Maybe you are an epic fantasy writer, but your main thing is that every one of your main protagonists in your book is a monster of some sort rather than a human. Or like if there's just something about you that sticks you out and you do it well, people are going to come to you and want to watch it. Same thing with Quentin. Like you said, I think it's really important. He doesn't want to make more than 10 movies. Technically, Kill Bill is 2 movies, but he considers it 1. But he's not going to make more than, I guess, 10 or 11 movies because he thinks that people kind of go out with that. But he doesn't need to make more. He has exactly what he wants. He has the stories he wants to tell. And in his case, because he's done such a good job at setting up his world, that he literally just builds it and people do come because they want more of that.
Well, that's part of his world. Part of his world is I'm going to make 10 movies. So every one of my movies is going to be worth seeing, right? That's built in. And who knows how long on these interviews and stuff he's been talking about that. It could be, he could have been, I
think
I
for
really
a while.
don't know because I haven't spent much time. He's probably been talking about it for a while. And so people know when he makes a big deal out of a movie, then or when he makes a movie, it's going to very naturally be a big deal. So there are sort of these things that you expect, and they create these expectations. Like, again, when I think of Chris Nolan, a Chris Nolan movie is probably going to be dark. It's going to be dark in some respects. It's going to have practical effects. It's going to have perhaps a twist on it that would be that makes it very unconventional from another kind of movie. For example, what was the one where it was a Chris Nolan movie, right? Where it like starts in somewhere in the middle and it starts at the end and it like contracts into the, was that a Chris Nolan one?
Yeah. And if you wouldn't have asked, it's one of my favorite movies, but yeah. For some reason, I'm blanking on the name, but
I'm totally blanking on the name. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it's got Guy Pearce. Yeah, he has memory loss. I just, for some reason, the name is just
yeah, totally.
That's so weird.
Anyway,
mind, keep going. Right? I'll remember it.
But that, and then of course the big reveal at the end of the
Memento.
Prestige.
Memento.
That's right, Memento. Yeah. Right. So there are these, and even the style of the music and just everything. Right. So it's all. It's all just part of the world, and the movies can be entirely different movies, but you're still gonna get that satisfaction because you've been transported into one of Nolan's worlds, or into one of Tarantino's worlds, or into one of Cameron's worlds, right?
Yeah, and that's
whether it's Terminator or Titanic or Avatar, you're in a James Cameron world. It's a completely different movie, but you're in one of his worlds, and so you know it. It's crazy.
And that's where I say, this is not to downplay his amazing movies because he's made several, but where Spielberg is a little bit different because, especially a lot of his newer ones, I can watch a handful of Spielberg movies and not know it's a Spielberg movie.
Correct.
And it's just different. Not saying that is bad. It just maybe early on there are movies that definitely differentiated himself. And maybe that's what Quentin is trying to avoid, and also gain some attraction, of course, by only making 10 movies. But yeah, right. I think, at least my opinion, is going a route where you can make that even more distinction between you and others is just, if not for anything else, it's super cool. Like it's really neat that you can make yourself different like that.
Yeah. It really is, and it's like the primary thing. Like, and so I think for Spielberg, and granted, if you're listening to this, number one, if you're listening to this, hi, like you're probably the only one. So hey, number one, number two, if you happen to be the only person listening to this and you're a huge Spielberg fan, then I feel like you should contact us because that would just be a crazy coincidence. But I don't know very much about Spielberg, so I could be like wrong here. But my thinking is that Spielberg doesn't. it's not clear to me that he has a point of view that he applies to his movies, right? A worldview around how a film should be made. I'm sure he has opinions on things. I'm not saying he doesn't have opinions, but the question is, how much does the opinion color the movie that you make, and how much does your opinion color the movie that you which movie you decide to make to start with, which is a big thing for these people.
It's huge.
And then once you're actually making the movie, how much does the way you like to make movies actually come into it beyond just some preferences over the years? And so this is where I think Spielberg is probably like at the top tier. I mean, unarguably so. At the top tier of fantastic directors. If you get Spielberg directing your movie, it's going to be a fantastic movie. But there's nothing special about it in a certain sense. Not that some Spielberg movies aren't special. Of course they are. He's got a big name. Jurassic Park is one of my favorite movies ever. It's right. So don't come at me, bro. Right. I love a Spielberg movie, but he's right there on the edge of, can you even call it a Spielberg movie, or is it just a really good movie directed by Chris Spielberg? I think you can make an argument either way, but these cases like Tarantino, Nolan, and Cameron, and Shyamalan, and I'm sure there's others, are clear cuts. And I'm not even saying that's better or worse. I'm just saying it's why you know their names the way that you do. They're separate, absolutely. And they have a brand and a world applied to their movies. And so Inglourious Bastards was just, again, the first Tarantino movie I've seen, but like if the rest of them have that point of view applied, I can't wait to watch them. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's when you watch another Tarantino movie, it's the same. You get the same thing, but they're still just as good. You're not going to get bored down or bogged down by a Tarantino movie. So that's actually, man, we could create a whole series just on that topic of creating your own thing. We've talked about world building before, but so the movie itself though, so we have our 4 categories that we kind of go up by. And the first one is, we've talked about them a little bit, but we'll just go down specifically. Plot, number 1. What I really like about this movie, and I would say the plot itself, again, it's a Tarantino movie, but it's a mashup of a bunch of different things. It's alternative history. It's World War II. It follows a kind of like dissecting, or 2 different storylines that come together, but it's all so well crafted, the plot. And I think what really comes down to it, like you said, the moment to moment story climaxes, and then the time to breathe, but then it just culminates in this epic finale that he's so well known for, that just really hits home, and it's super satisfying.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, of course, the plot was fantastic, right? The actual story, the different people, of course, we'll get to the characters, but the different people that are inserted to make the plot interesting, like the Jew hunter and then the bear Jew, and just the different characters were also dynamic. And so as they all played to the plot, it was really fascinating. Now, one thing interesting about the plot, and this came out in one of the interviews that I was watching with Tarantino. So he is definitely in the fiction book, writing world, what we would call a pantser, right? Or a discovery writer. So he lets the story, he has the basic structure in his mind, like most fiction writers tend to. But basically all the details get filled in the writing. And this is hard for anybody who has never even attempted to write fiction. I've attempted to write a little bit, so I know just a very little bit about what he's saying. But even with that, I do know just enough to really get it. But to sound somebody talk, or to hear somebody talk like this, it's kind of nuts. But he's like, I literally let the characters tell me what they want to do, right? Like I write, and they tell, I didn't. He's like, I didn't find out that. The guy, right? So the first guy that you see, Landa, who is the Jew hunter in the movie, he didn't know until near the end of his story arc, his character arc. Not near the end, that's not fair to say, but as he was going along, he didn't realize that this was a guy who was so linguistically brilliant. And as he's writing the story, he finds himself in these different situations where he needs to be able to speak French and German and Italian and English. And so it turns out he knows 5 languages, but that wasn't the plan, right? Landa told him in the writing that he needed to speak 5 languages, right? And so that's the kind of person that he was. And so I appreciate that deeply, because what's happening is he's letting the story breathe as he's writing it, and it's developing. But then at the end, of course, now all those little breaths that you've had all throughout, that there might be some things, now he can go back to the beginning, clean up all those loose ends, but also make the dynamics of those loose ends even a little bit more interesting. Like maybe insert a couple other scenes where he has to, like, speak a different language to somebody in order to, like, sort of underscore that that's a big part of his character, right? So yeah, the plot is brilliant, and I could tell already, like, hindsight, that one of the reasons why I like the plot is it's not structured in the way that you would design a story for. Okay, so this is important. As I've been looking into some of the world building stuff, like I was telling you about, I learned that there's really a difference between psychological storytelling and world building and sociological storytelling and world building. Okay, are you a Game of Thrones fan?
No, I never got into it.
Cool. So me neither. At least not yet. But basically, what a lot of people say is that as soon as the the original author, George R.R. Martin, he couldn't write fast enough to keep up with the show,
right?
Basically. And so for the last season, basically every season of the show was great. And then the last season, like, the screenwriters came in and basically had to write the last season. And it apparently it was very disappointing, totally deviating from everything. And it was just bad. Well, one writer I was, reading on that pointed to an article that sort of made the case that, well, what happened is the screenwriters came in and applied psychological storytelling to it. In other words, well, we know that people like this kind of thing, and it needs to have this, and it needs to have this specific structure, blah, 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 blah. Versus George R.R. Martin is a sociological world builder. So he lets the world tell him what's happening, and the world interacts with itself, and storylines and threads and character arcs and things like that emerge naturally as a result of the sociology of the world. And so what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is Quentin Tarantino is not necessarily thinking, oh, well, I know that at 3 minutes into the movie, I'm going to want to psychologically switch over to this other thing. No, he's playing the sociological game of, in real life, this super tense situation between a Jew or a man who is hiding, a French man who is hiding a Jewish family in his home, and a Nazi literally called the Jew hunter, right? That thing would actually be a very, very tense 22-minute long conversation in real life. So sociologically, he's world building with the world. And the plot, you can very much tell, is a result mostly of that. I would say 75 to 80% that, and maybe about 20% psychological stuff that as a director, he knows what makes people tick, right? Yeah. But for the most part, the world drove it. And so the plot, masterful, in my opinion, a great plot.
Think how many directors would use, probably all of them except for Tarantino, would use that opening scene as a 2, 3, 4 minute segment where there's so many different quick ways you could do it, where someone goes in and just has the Ben, like, look for the Jews, hears something under the floorboard or something, a stereotypical thing, and then there's your opening. Just versus, like what you said, how it actually probably maybe would play out with someone like that.
Right? Like I could see again the 3 to 4 minute conversation. He hears the noise and he goes, something like, "You lied to me." Men, whatever. And they come in and okay. And it might have been a fine scene. Yeah. It might have been just fine. It might have even been good, but it wouldn't have been great. Right. And it wouldn't have been what it was. Right.
Absolutely.
And that emerged as a result of the point of view of the writer, letting the world and the sociology of the world just sort of happen. And anyway, I thought that was really, really, really great. So I had another thought on that, but then it slipped my mind. So if it comes back up, fine. But we can move on.
Emotional response, kind of going hand in hand with the plot, but it goes out saying that the response that Quentin Tarantino wants from you, he's going to get, whether that be absolute silence, holding onto your breath because of a tense moment, or outright laughing at violence that you probably shouldn't be laughing at, but it's so outrageous that you have to. There's just so many parts in that movie where you have different reactions and emotions based on what's going on. And it's not, okay, the beginning is very action filled, and then you slowly get introduced to like the solemn ending or whatever. It's up and down, up and down. You're laughing, and then your mind is blown by something you see on screen, and then it's tense again. He really makes you feel what he wants you to feel every single moment, and what the characters are feeling in the scenes. I think of the part where, and the music adds a lot to it too. But when what's the main woman's name, Shoshana, when she is when the German guy is kind of trying to like woo her or whatever, and she gets brought to that fancy restaurant, and then Hans Landa shows up behind her, and you're just like, oh crap, this scene just got this much more tense. So just amazing being able to kind of twist on your emotions there throughout the movie.
100%. I think my favorite part of that, and of course that, oh my gosh, like the comedy that was worked in so strategically, like when the bear Jew guy comes out and starts beating people up, and then any scene with Aldo Rain, like just the comedy of it just so perfectly counterbalances the seriousness of the Germans and all of that. Probably my favorite part about it that I thought was really interesting was, so in marketing and of course in story writing and things like that, we talk a lot about the idea of like the promise and then the payoff that you get. And it was so fascinating that essentially, and just, hey, spoiler alert, essentially they promise fairly early on into the movie that this theater is going to get blown up with all the Nazis inside of it. That's the promise. Right. That's the promise. And at the end of the movie, after lots of tension, right? So, I mean, that probably happens at 40 minutes into the movie, and it's a 2.5 hour long movie. So, right. So 2 hours later, what happens? The place explodes into flames exactly as planned. And what happened, and you got the massive payoff that you were wanting. Like, because when the chick Shoshana, when she says, we're going to burn down this building full of Nazis, you're like, heck yeah, you are. Like, that must happen. And there was no plot twist at the end. I'm getting there. There was no plot twist at the end, though, that like ruined that. We got the satisfyingness. It's almost like, can I say this? I don't know. This is my podcast. I can say what I want to, right? It's like the satisfying thing, like of holding out, like when you're having sex or something like that, right? It's like, yeah, it could end in 5 minutes, but like, should it? When it could wait an hour and it's built up and it's a lot better, right? So I think because he delivered on that, that was really special and important. But throughout the way, you had a couple unexpected twists. You had some people die early on that you probably thought wouldn't have died. But then the most interesting twist, and it happened in the context of a genre shift too, was when the guy that the movie was made about came into the theater room and shot up the Jewish chick who owned the theater, Shoshana, and then, like they shot each other basically, and you get, so you knew that they were going to die anyway because they were all going to be in the theater, right? So they were all going to die, but Quentin goes the extra mile and kills them in this very, like, it was the most almost Romeo and Juliet kind of scene you can just imagine, and they get taken out as the theater is burning, but they die literally because of this tension that was built up between them to bring their character arc to its own satisfying ending in the context of the larger scene, which was so cool. I've never seen anything like that.
Yeah, so two things. I think you're right. A lot of people I think a lot of movies, I'm thinking about your kind of stereotypical action movie that might be good. The ending falls flat. Either there's too many twists and turns, like, okay, the bad guy got away from this initial plan, and then he gets away from plan B. I don't know. It just gets kind of boring. But here, you're right. You had some like twists and turns on these side plots. But yeah, you were promised, or you were hoping that the Germans are going to get blown up, shot up, whatever in this theater. And that's exactly what you got. And why would you want anything else except for seeing Adolf Hitler's face get blown to pieces? Like,
exactly.
That's what you want. I'm glad you brought up the scene with Shoshana and I forget his name, but the guy with the German the movie was made, because they weren't in a relationship. She loved the guy that she worked with at the theater. But along the way, she kind of I think she could kind of tell that the war took a toll on him a little bit. They had their own little separate story arcs and then together. And the fact that Quentin knew that relationship had to have some sort of ending is just brilliant. He could have easily let that hang. And honestly, no one probably would have realized it. I don't think anyone would have realized that there was a relationship that needed some type of finality to it unless he put that
Exactly.
scene in. And it might be one of his more brilliant scenes. I agree with you. What a great ending to that little story there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, 100%. And then but there was other little threads too, like when Landa put the the bombs right there
Yes.
behind Hitler's
Yes.
seat, and also Goebbels. And so at the end, when he's making a deal with Aldo
Yeah.
Rain and the US government, which is so crazy, he like takes credit for all of this stuff, but like he actually did it. So
Yeah.
he's like, right. And so it turns out that I guess at that point, like for whatever reason, he kind of knows that everything is going down. And so
I
his
think so.
only hope for rescue is to basically surrender and try to work out a deal. And so he literally in that process, like sets things up a certain way to make him look like some sort of a good guy in the process. So really just, man, masterful handling of that.
I have no I'm probably reading into this, but it just struck me how, remember at the beginning of the speech he gave the Frenchman about the Germans being like hawks and Jews like mice.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he was kind of the hawk taking the advantage of putting the dynamite under the seat, contacting the US government. But in the way, though, he kind of, what his representation was of a Jew, kind of a mouse trying to weasel his way out of a situation that was going to end badly for him and try to find his way. I don't know if Quentin Tarantino meant for that to happen. Probably not, but it's just a cool, just a neat little ending to his story arc too.
Well, even if he didn't, though, it's fascinating how that can be seen in it. Like just even the assumption of that's how he built his worlds, like, and that that's how he built this world, like that actually coming through in the story, even in subtle ways, I think is really interesting. So
when it comes to
the emotional response was amazing.
When it comes, and we kind of talked a lot about the characters here. I think we're kind of talking about both of them, but with the characters, I'm pretty sure, I think multiple directors do this, but Tarantino specifically has an actor in mind when he writes these parts for ones that he knows he wants to do. But we kind of talked a little bit for Landa. He didn't know because he needed to find someone who spoke 4 languages, who was an actor and who could play the part. I mean, it kind of narrows it down quite a bit. And they finally found, I don't know his real name, but they finally found the guy to play the part. But the acting choices, as good as the plot is, as good as the emotional responses, and Tarantino sets it up, he sets the actors up for success for sure. But man, the actors do amazing work on that. I wonder what the set is like. Obviously, they follow the director's direction, but I wonder what kind of liberty or what he has them kind of act like. From my understanding of interviews, he likes it when the actors kind of look at the script and come up with backstories for their characters and make suggestions to them as far as just like getting in their own mind with it and everything. So it works out perfectly. And I love Brad Pitt's character in there.
So good,
so funny and so good. And Brad Pitt's one of those people, I think we mentioned it, where you're watching him and you know it's Brad Pitt, but at the same time, you kind of overlook that it's Brad Pitt too, because he's such a good actor. It's hard not to notice him, but he's such a good actor that you still enjoy the character he portrays as well. Characters, though, are top notch in this and in any of his films.
Oh, and this was incredible. And there's a couple interesting things there. So actually in this film, he didn't really have many of the characters in mind, from what I understand. Even Brad Pitt, I don't think that he had his character. He knew what the character should be like, but I don't think he made the film for Brad Pitt.
Gotcha.
Now, he did say that in the case of the Kill Bill movies, he had Uma Thurman. He was like, Uma Thurman has to play this. It's written for her.
So maybe
like,
it's certain characters that he has in mind.
It is, and he does do that for sure, from what I understand. The case of Landa is so interesting, right? Because Landa, whoever plays him. So this guy was like a foreign made-for-TV actor, basically on the downward spiral.
Yeah.
If you can even imagine that, on
crazy.
The downward spiral in his career. And I know he talked about this. I can't remember if the interview that I saw he talked about this, and you told me this, or it was one or the other. I think it might have even been both. But the way that they framed this was basically like he didn't find this guy till the end, and so the Quentin's like, well, this guy saved my movie, but this guy's like, Quentin saved my career. So like literally, Quentin saved his career, and this guy saved his movie. Arguably, and he won an Emmy award, I think.
Yeah, or an Oscar, whatever it is.
Or whatever it is, Oscar, Emmy, I don't even know.
Yeah.
He won whatever great award he won for his role in this movie, and rightly so. Fantastic. I'm sitting here in the first scene watching this thinking, this is literally one of the best actors I have ever seen in my life. I mean, I had that decided before the end of the first scene, and he won obviously awards for it, and that was great. But I just, it was so interesting how that came together. Like the guy was literally on his way out as a failed actor, and then had the movie of a defining movie in his career. Isn't that nuts? Just how the timing works out on stuff like that sometimes.
That is wild. I guess maybe it's worthwhile watching Tarantino's movies from the first one to the last. I don't know, but Inglourious and Django are my two favorites, and he is also in Django as the main character. And he's just as fantastic in that as well.
Wait, hang on. I was looking at something. Say that one more time. Who's in Django as the main character?
Well, as one of the main characters, the guy who plays Landa. So he's in Django, and they just happen to be like my favorite by Quentin. But
fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Cool.
Yeah, characters are great. And then the last part, category intent. We already discussed this really, but it's his own category, and it's part of the world building thing, and he just nails it right on the head.
Yeah, he built his own category, and so it's so fascinating, right? Because what else could you put this movie in? It's got elements of historical fiction, it's got the elements of romance, it's got a massive comedy thing. The category is a category all its own, and like it's a 10 out of 10. Like what? Well, how do you get like a 5 out of 10 Quentin Tarantino movie or Christopher Nolan movie or whatever? Like they're just they are what they are. So
I forgot too about the character. Shout out to Michael Myers for being in the movie.
Perfect.
I love that scene.
Perfect, right?
I feel like I don't know if it's an exaggeration or if it's exactly like that, but that it seems like a representation of how British people behave together. Just the conversation flow, and I don't know if the scene is comedic, but I don't know why it's comedic. Does that make sense? It works so well with him. Anyway, that brings us to our meter.
Yeah. We need some sort of a bumper right here with meat and meters.
Like a sizzle thing. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so if it had some meat and a meter, that would be a good way to do it.
Yeah. So we, if you're new to the meter, we rate movies on a scale from Impossible Meat to Steak. We got Impossible Meat, then Spam, then Bacon, then Burger, then Bacon Burger for those really great ones, but just don't quite make it all the way, and then the top tier Steak. So, Steve, what is your final verdict on Inglourious?
I had a hard time with this. I really did. So I am going with a steak. I'm giving this with a steak. And here's my problem. I really went back and forth between steak and bacon burger, and not because of the movie necessarily, but because I feel like we're watching so many steaks. I'm starting to question whether or not my sense of a movie is wrong. But again, I have nothing bad to say. Like I can't even think of a criticism. I have to be completely honest. Yeah. I can't think of a criticism that I personally have of this movie. It was just so well executed. And I even thought that the whole thing where like so much of the movie is in a different language and it's got like subtitles and stuff like that. I thought that was going to bother me. I literally forgot about that even until just now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was nothing. It was literally like the smallest, like nothing burger in the movie. And so what can I say?
I think it's something like only 30% of the movies in English or something like that. I read.
Yeah, which is hard to believe. Right?
I have to go with the steak as well. And I agree. I think that we are watching too many good movies, but there's so many good movies we haven't seen. And why watch mediocre ones when you can watch great ones? But you're right. Sure. I just think we talked about before, it kind of comes close to however you can judge what something perfect is, but to a perfect movie where you're right. Throughout it, there was no lulls. There was no point where I thought something was odd. It just all flowed perfect. And Yeah, perfect movie,
Well,
in my
and
opinion.
to be fair, we are kind of going right now in our sort of like just as friends, like we're watching these movies together, and we are kind of going through like our picks, right?
Yeah,
Like some of your
these
favorite
are
movies
ours,
that
yeah.
I've never seen, and my favorite movies that you've never seen, and so
Yep.
like it's pretty likely unless one of us just landed on a dud. So as we maybe run out of movies that fall into that category, and we start to maybe go to the theaters and watch newer stuff that's coming out,
Absolutely.
we might have some, some different thoughts. So
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Well, Steve, you know what? I didn't put down a story of the week here. I can whip one up if you need me to. If
well,
you have one.
I didn't. I actually didn't either. I didn't write one down either, and I'm sure I could think of something. But I think maybe we just end it here for now. No story of the week this week. We've already told. Oh, I've talked for a long time, so
This would be our first one without story of the week. I don't know to feel
well,
sad or to get over it.
it wouldn't be our first one because we've done some that were just updates, right?
That's
Like basic
true.
little
That's
updates
true.
on where we are.
I think
and
I'm
stuff
good
like
calling it
that.
quits. It's been a longer one, and I think I'm good with that.
Yeah, we still got one more to go too, so it's getting late where I'm
Ooh,
at. So.
yes. All right, Steve. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I will talk to you in a couple minutes on our next one.
We'll make sure to change shirts for your benefit.
No.
No, it won't happen.
No,
All
it
right.
won't.
Everybody take care. God bless. Hide your kids, hide your wife, share this podcast. It's a steak. Inglourious Bastards.
Steak.
Fantastic movie. Go watch it, but not with your kids. Maybe with your wife, but not with your kids. All right. Take care.